that a few years ago. Well, more than a few, probably about 12 years ago. Physical fitness comes into play on that. I don't know if anybody heard about they excavated knights, the 14th century knight in Stirling Castle just recently, and they just did a facial reconstruction of him. And if you go on the internet and look at facial reconstruction and cross-reference it with the Scottish knight, they'll have a picture of it. They can tell from the skeleton, from where the muscles insert on the bone, you get an idea of the muscle tone of the person when they were alive. This Scottish knight, they said, has a physique of a very fit rugby player. Very fit. Well-muscled, built for endurance and strength. Not a skinny little guy with little skinny arms, or something kind of this image we have of knights. Particularly if you look at the tapestries, the illuminations of the period, everybody looks very skinny. That's probably artistic license for the period. These guys were really fit. They had to be really super fit. Obviously, if they survived childhood, they already came out with a pretty good constitution if they were going to survive childhood diseases and illnesses. Plus, when you look at this guy's facial reconstruction, he's got a great big deep scar right across the skull. I mean, it's deep. And that's in the bone. He had a head injury, a serious wound to the head that he had survived and healed pretty well years before his death. He actually died, I believe he died from an arrow to the chest. That's the actual wound that killed him. So, physical fitness and being physically fit was a big component of their lives. They didn't have to actually sit and think about it too much. I mean, if you're putting on, my kit is fairly close to accurate in weight. It probably weighs, it's not more than 30 pounds, maybe 35 pounds in total. But if you're wearing 35 pounds, 8 hours a day, every day, since you're about 14 years old, you're going to get somebody rather physically fit. The skills of fighting itself, so the training in particular, aren't necessarily dependent on being physically fit. So that is, you can be a really excellent fighter and not actually be in the greatest shape in the world. So there isn't really, particularly for the SCA fighter, there isn't always a real strong motivation to become more physically fit to improve fighting. Because fighting is like anything else, it's a skill set. You learn to adapt the skill set to your physicality, and you can go out and you can accomplish really great things that way. So the motivation to become physically fit, though, becomes, for example, comes in as we age. When you're 25, you don't have to do much when you're out fighting. It just all kind of comes naturally. Maybe around 35, you start noticing things getting sluggish. Around 45, you start going, what am I doing? You hit 48, and you go, I've got a squire who's, or a man-at-arms who's 48, and he's like, what am I doing? I'm in trouble. I got to start doing something. You start to notice it. When I was Earl Marshal in Artemisia, the Society Marshal kept coming out with new regulations saying, look, our injury rate is going up and up and up. What's going on out there? Get it under control. And I said, that's because our age rate is going up and up and up. And in athletics and in sports, you see that all the time. To somebody who's worked with athletes, that's no surprise. As we get older, we're going to get more prone to injury if we're not taking care of ourselves. So that's the first motivation to do something to stay physically fit, is as you age, to stay in conditions so that you can keep performing at a level that you were at, maybe not in your 20s, but definitely in your 30s. That's something you want to hang on to. And it takes more work as you age to do that. Secondly, we talk about what kind of physicality does this sport really require from somebody. What's the one thing you really have to do well if there's one physicality? Probably endurance. Just the ability to stay in there, keep going. You get into a fight, it's taking longer than you thought. You don't want to run out of wind. You don't want your arms to get tired. You don't want your chest to get tired. You don't want to get tired in the middle of that fight. Same thing if you're in a war. That's a big one in war. If they have a 2-hour res battle, you can fight 15 minutes and then rest for an hour and go out and fight the last 15 minutes. That's what a lot of guys do. This is a lot of fighting in there someplace. So stamina is another big one that's important. So stamina and injury prevention, those are the two major things that we look at. Both of those can be accomplished through very specific types of training. When people are doing physical conditioning, they make a lot of really classical mistakes. One of them is people go out to the gym, they go, all right, that's it. I'm overweight, I got bad knees, now my back's starting to go, I'm going to get in shape before I can. They go to the gym, they get on the treadmill, they crank it up to 11, and they run their asses off. They get done, they feel like crap, they go home, and a week later they gain 2 pounds. And they go, what the? I've got to run harder and eat less. So they start doing that more and more often. They get sick, it doesn't work, they feel miserable, they dread going to the gym because it's this torture experiment, and they give up. That's the first classic mistake that most people make, is doing too much too soon. Not knowing what exactly it is when they're trying to do conditioning. So today I'll help try to give you guys some pointers to kind of direct you in a better direction to how you can handle some of these kind of physical conditions. I'm not going to obviously use that guy, that's not a whiteboard, but and I'm not going to use that one because I don't know if everybody's going to, I don't want next creating all day. So, talking about endurance first of all, really quickly. You have different ways, your body has, let's put it this way, you have one thing that your cells use for fuel. One thing, that's ATP. I'm not going to go into a biochem lesson today, I'm not going to go and draw the Krebs cycle for somebody. Yeah, I know, I'm really glad you guys said really doing you a disfavor. I know you want a biochem lesson today. ATP is the only thing your cells use for fuel. It's the only thing. ATP comes from one thing. It comes from glucose, which is blood sugar. That's the only thing it comes from. You get blood sugar from various sources in your diet. You can get it straight, obviously, from carbohydrates. That's the simplest way to get glucose. Some carbohydrates, simpler carbohydrates, sugars, particularly fruit sugars, are already almost blood sugar. They are almost glucose. So those convert very quickly, and they go through this thing, if you've had biochem before, they go through the Krebs cycle, become ATP. They enter the cells, and the cells can use that. Or the cells convert it into ATP, they can use it for fuel. You can get energy from lipids, from fats. Fats are very closely related to carbohydrates. But fats have to go through a very specific process to convert to glucose. And I'll talk about that a little more here in a minute. Those two factors, glucose and fat, are the two major sources of fuel for your body. But they're both processed in rather different ways. So when you are putting a demand on your body for energy, your body's going to look at how urgent the need for energy is, how well conditioned you are as to what kind of sources are available to use, and it's going to pick one accordingly. When we used to do athletes, we used to do what we call the VO2 submaximal test. Everybody knows what a submaximal test is. You have a cardiologist there for that. We don't do those because we have to have a crash cardiologist because that's taking you to your absolute heart rate to the maximum threshold to get an idea of what your stamina and endurance is. We just run you till you can't run anymore. The VO2 submaximal was designed so that we don't have to take you to your maximum heart rate. What we have is, anybody have one? Anybody had one of these before? You've had one? They put a mask on and it looks like a costume from like G.I. Joe's Cobra guys is what I always thought. Neoprene blue mask, and it has a hose in the front. In the hose there's a little meter, and it reads the chemical composition of your breath. Every time you inhale and every time you exhale, it reads your chemical composition of your breath. And we use those readings to determine kind of what your fuel mixture is. Are you getting most of your glucose from carbohydrates, or are you getting it mostly from fats? And we can actually measure that and read that. So we can take an athlete in, we can look at that, and that can give us an assessment on what they need to do in their endurance training. So we can really actually measure these kinds of things now more than we used to be able to. In fact, when I started training in 2003, the technology still wasn't out yet. It came out about 2005, 2006, became more available. We started using it to test athletes to get an idea of what they need to do in their training. Lastly, you can get energy from protein. Energy from protein is difficult because protein's first primary demand in the body is for tissue rebuilding, it's for tissue growth, it's for maintaining healthy tissue. The body doesn't look at protein as a primary source for fuel. What happens with protein is that protein has a nitrogen molecule on it, and to convert that into a carbohydrate, the liver has to break off that nitrogen molecule. And that gets converted into uric acid, so you urinate that out. So actually people who go on the Atkins diet, for example, they'll lose a lot of weight because there's a high metabolic demand placed on the body to convert proteins into carbohydrates for fuel. And so that helps speed up their metabolism, and they start to burn more calories just sleeping, and that helps them drop weight. But if you have a family history of gout, you don't want to be on a high protein diet. because you're probably not going to process that uric acid out. And that's what the idea is right there, because we're going to talk about how those affect your training methodology. The common thing, I go back to that one mistake that everybody makes when they go into the gym and they start training too hard. They burn carbohydrates for fuel. You can train your body to burn more carbohydrates or more fat. You can condition your body to do that through the type of training you use. If you go into the gym and you hit it hard and you're working at your near maximum thresholds all the time because you're thinking, I've got to hit this and crank it out, I've got to really hit this hard today, I've got to make some results happen, you're going to start burning glucose. First thing your body's going to do is it's going to go to the bloodstream, it's going to find all the glucose in your bloodstream, and it's going to burn that up. That takes 10 minutes. That's gone. Then the body looks to glycogen. Glycogen is glucose stored in muscles. It looks at the muscles you use the most. So first of all, if you go to the gym and you hit it hard, and you do the same activity every time, so you get on the treadmill and run, the body goes, oh, we're running. We're going to use all this glycogen in the muscles, in the legs, in the hamstring, in the quadriceps, in the gastroc to help get this going, because that's the demand. Those are the cells that are demanding fuel. So we're going to use the glucose stored in there, and then after you go to dinner, your body goes, and you know what? I bet we're going to run tomorrow too. I think we should probably pack more glycogen into those muscles again. So the next day you run, still hard, not so bad. The body goes, I bet we run tomorrow too. Let's put more glycogen into those muscles. So eventually, you're running just fine. You've got to max it out to run to get the same kind of effort you're getting in. And all you're burning is that glycogen in your bloodstream. And that sounds like a great idea because you're storing up these kinds of muscles to generate that kind of fuel for you. Same thing goes with fighting. When you're out fighting, your body goes, I know what muscle systems we're going to use, and I'm going to put glycogen into those muscles, and it's going to get easier for those muscles to perform this job every time I go out. But once that glycogen is gone, you're done. If you're exercising at a maximum intensity, if you're going to the gym and cranking it every day, trying to hit it as hard as you can, that's all you're doing. You're conditioning your body to run on sugar. And once your body's out of sugar, you're done. No more. You're going to crash. So, what we want to start using for endurance is fat. Now, fat, everybody knows, has more calories than a carbohydrate. And it's a better fuel source. That's why. It generates more energy for you. There's a trick to it, though. Your body needs oxygen in the bloodstream to convert fat into a carbohydrate. So it needs oxygen reserves. That means if you're going to the gym and you're running again, and you're in oxygen debt, you're huffing and puffing, and then you stop running and you got to catch your breath, you're not burning fat. You're not optimizing your body's ability to generate fuel for a long duration activity. You need to have oxygen to do that. And what we find is when we do these submaximal tests on people, we can also determine what their VO2 uptake. We can determine what their volume, what their lung capacity is. We can also determine how much of that oxygen gets into their bloodstream and gets to cells and gets to working muscles. So it's no coincidence that the people who are better at burning fat have more oxygen in their blood. And when you have more oxygen in your blood, your muscles recover faster. So here's how that works. You're in a fight, you're in a tournament, it's the finals of Crown, you've got a really intense fight, you fight really hard, let's say 30 seconds, all out, non-stop. And 30 seconds when you're going all out is a long time. You back off, your opponent backs off, but you've been training to burn fat. You've been training to increase the amount of oxygen you get into your bloodstream. Your heart's, let's say 90% its maximum when you stop fighting. In less than a minute, it's going to go down near to its resting rate. You're going to recover while your opponent is still catching his breath. That's endurance. It's not how high your heart rate goes, it's how quickly you bring your heart rate down. And that's because you've learned, you've taught your body to burn fat. When you teach your body to burn fat, it automatically increases the amount of oxygen you get into your bloodstream because it needs that to convert that fat into glucose and to convert that into ATP. So that's the trick. We call that kind of training aerobic base building. If you do not have an aerobic base, you do not have endurance. It's just that simple. Lance Armstrong will do 3 months of aerobic base training. That's why his resting pulse, 33 beats per minute. He's trained his heart rate down. His heart is so good at pumping nutrients, it doesn't have to beat higher than 33 beats per minute. That's his base rate. So it's even lower than that when he sleeps. Wow.
What's an average dude who's not like horribly out of shape? What's an average heart rate for a guy who's in moderately decent shape?
Anywhere between 60 and 80 beats per minute. Yeah, that's normal. That's average. I mean, I'm also an EMT, so we don't worry about people's heart rates until we see it above 90. We worry about anybody below 50. We take a good look at, unless they're athletic. We worry about below 50. So, yeah, considerably different. That's a big difference. We want to see in athletes, we want to see a heart rate recovery of 30 beats in 55 seconds. That's what we want to see. We know somebody's athletically conditioned when we can get that kind of recovery response. The training for it is really easy. It's just really boring. And athletes hate boring in a big way. So we take a guy in. We had a guy who was a competitive mountain biker. Give him the VO2 submaximal test. The guy's in phenomenal shape. He's 5'11". I think he was 160. He was 4% body fat. Wow. His lung capacity was enormous. It was 73 liters per kilogram of weight. That's huge. That's a huge amount of oxygen he's taking in. 13% of the oxygen he inhaled went into his blood. He exhaled everything else out. And we're all watching the printout, we're all watching the diagram, we're all looking at him. He's riding on this, on the stationary bike looking at us, and we're looking at him. He starts shaking his head because he knows what we're going to tell him. No, so you're going to go to the park and you're going to ride around the lake for 3 months. You're just going to go around the park and around the lake. And he knew that was coming and he was dreading that. He's like, oh, I hate that. Like, yeah, we can tell you hate that because you can tell by your readings you haven't been doing that. So to build endurance, what you want to look at is when you're doing your cardio, first of all, you need to pick an activity that you're going to be able to do sustained for a long period of time. Because the key to this, to begin with, is duration. We have a lot of different factors we can play with when we're building training exercises for people. We can do duration, frequency, intensity, mode of exercise. Pick a mode of exercise, so something that you can do for a long, sustained period of time. For most people, that's walking. Most people, some people can do a stationary bike. If you've got a gym that you can go to, sometimes you have an elliptical machine there, and those are good. Not a lot of people are going to go run and develop their base, unless you're already a runner.
What's a good duration? What's a long duration?
Well, it depends. Again, it depends on where you're at physically. Usually for somebody who's completely deconditioned, they haven't been in, and by deconditioned I mean if you haven't been in a gym in over a year or more, you're deconditioned. If you haven't been exercising frequently, by that I mean at least 3 times, more preferably a week. The best thing to do is to start out with about 30 minutes of activity. The reason you start 30 minutes is not going to help you build your base. But if you go out and do 90 minutes your first day out, and then the next day your knees go, no. We're not going to do that again. You've got to give yourself time to allow the tendons and ligaments in your body and your joints to become accustomed to a new activity. 90 minutes is too much to start out. But 90 minutes is ultimately what you're shooting for. 90 minutes to 2 hours sometimes is ultimately what you're going to shoot for. I don't know who's got 2 hours of time to go ride a bike or walk. I mean, I don't.
You have to do it in one stretch. You can't even do
No.
1 hour section.
Yep. You do not need to do it in one stretch. You can break it up into 10-minute pieces all day long. It is not required to do it in one stretch. So you can split it up throughout the day. We still see the same response.
Does it have to be in a 24-hour period, though?
It has to be within a 24-hour period. Yeah.
What's the intensity level you're shooting for?
Again, that also depends on the individual. Everybody's different. What we look at when we're talking about this is we start looking at heart rate maximums. You can go online. I don't use this. There's a Kervonin's formula to determine your maximum heart rate. Has anybody heard of that?
Subtract your age from 220.
Yeah. It's crap. It's garbage. Don't use it. But if you absolutely are the type of person that's got to have a number, go ahead and use it. Just be ready to adjust. It's too high, usually for women, it's too low. But it goes off the assumption that everybody's heart rate when you were born was 220 beats per minute.
Wow.
Everybody. My son, when he was born, his heart rate was 180 beats per minute. So there's no way Corona is going to work for him. It never worked for me, ever. So you've got a couple choices. You can find a trainer who can actually give you a test. There's different kinds of tests. There's one we call a graduated cardio test, which is where we just put you on a treadmill, we have you walk, and we get some feedback from you how you feel. That's the one I use most commonly. It doesn't require any fancy equipment. And we can get an idea, you can get an estimate of what your maximum heart rate might be, or where your heart rate should be. But mostly you just go by perceived exertion. And when you're doing aerobic base training, that's probably the best thing to do, is go on how you feel. So your intensity level should be breathing comfortably. That's the key. Remember, we're talking about oxygen. We're talking about having a surplus of oxygen in the bloodstream. Okay? Because when we are actually converting, when they say burning fat, we are literally burning fat. It's a thermogenic response. And it's great. When I take people and they start doing the base training, they would get started on the treadmill and start walking. For 2 weeks, they would just, nothing would be happening. 2 weeks into it, I get a phone call. I think I'm having a heart attack or a stroke. I was like, what? What's going on? I got off the treadmill today, I didn't change anything. I'm like, beet red, I'm sweating like crazy, and I just feel fantastic. I was like, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. You're burning fat. You're burning fat. You've got extra oxygen. All of your cells are getting oxygen. By the way, aerobic base training is not just good for endurance. It's good for cell growth. We see people, it's good for the immune system. It's good for you to get that amount of oxygen. Train the body to get oxygen into the blood. Because it doesn't matter how much air you inhale, if it's not getting into your blood, it's not doing anything. It's just filling up space in your lungs and coming right back out. So it's this, they'll experience that thermogenic response. They'll really be dripping with sweat, bright red. And I know I'm hitting that level when I feel the same way, when I'm doing training. I can feel it come on. Over time, I've learned to be able to sense, here it comes. I can actually feel my glucose levels stop. Anybody here hypoglycemic a little bit, get a little low blood sugar? You get that blood sugar response. You start to go, okay, I need to eat. If you ride it out, in a couple of minutes, suddenly it goes away. And then you get this kind of flushed feeling, and then you're sweating like crazy, even though you haven't increased your intensity at all. And that's that thermogenic response, and that does happen. So you kind of have to be your own judge on intensity. You have to kind of find out where you're going to go. If you're somebody who's rather physically conditioned, I have to jog to get into my base training zone. I can't even get there walking. I have to jog. If I get on the elliptical, I've got to increase the intensity a little bit. Not a ton, but I've got to do a little more than the average person has to. But I have friends who run marathons. They have to flat out run. We're talking 8 miles plus to get to that base zone where they can't get there. They hate that too, by the way. They hate it.
You're telling us we have to do a lot of boring cardio, right? That's the bottom line.
You have to do a lot of cardio, but you don't have to do a lot of cardio that's killing you. You don't have to go and do cardio that's going to wipe you out. You don't have to get on the treadmill and run your butt off, get on the bike and go as hard as you can up the hill. Yeah, you got to pick some boring cardio activity. And usually you've got to stick with it, again, depending on your physical conditioning, but normally 12 weeks to really see a difference.
So we're talking about hitting that level, so you're trying to get your heart rate to like 70, 80% of maximum?
Lower, like 65.
But keep it up for...
Keep it up, yeah.
For an hour or two every day.
An hour or so? Yeah, at first.
At
first. So we're working our way through this a little bit. But when you first start off, that's the key to building up endurance, is that aerobic base. Right.
You were talking earlier about not using your heart rate, not using anything. Use perceived endurance.
Perceived exertion, yeah.
Exertion, sorry.
Yeah.
You actually started to give us a little bit of an description.
Yeah, perceived exertion is, okay, so again, yeah, you want to be able to breathe comfortably. Okay? But you want to get a little sweat. They call it beading. Just a little sweat going. You don't have to be perspiring like an NBA player, but just a little bit of some sweat going. So when you go and do this cardio activity, whatever it is, and it doesn't particularly matter, if you're swimming, obviously you're not going to have a hard time sensing that beating. But, you'll figure something out. See, once you start to sense that, you want to try to maintain that.
What happens if you vary it, for example, like you do like 10 minutes on the treadmill walking, like 20 minutes on a stationary bicycle and elliptical?
It's fine.
Off that way?
Yep, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. And eventually, that's the kind of thing you want to get to. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, the body adapts to the physical activity you do. So even though you're going to start off picking a mode of activity, some kind of cardiovascular activity you can sustain, and pick something you enjoy doing too, because you're going to do it for a while. After a little while, the body will begin to anticipate that activity. It'll store glycogen in those muscles. It'll adapt. So you will get less out of that activity. So if you vary the activity after a little while, and again, don't start off doing this after about week 6, at least by week, don't do it before week 4, but I'd say around 6 weeks, you can start changing up the activity. You can do 10 minutes on the treadmill, you can do 10 minutes on the bike, you can do 20 minutes on something else, whatever you feel like, start varying it up. And this is what I tell people too, if the activity is getting incessantly boring and you don't want to do it because you're bored to death, that's definitely a sign it's time to pick something new. Find something else to do, change it up. Throw your body off. Don't let those muscles anticipate what you're going to do.
What classifies as cardio?
Cardio is any activity that's going to elevate your heart rate that you can maintain for 10 minutes or more at one time. Okay, so not weightlifting, but you can do endurance weightlifting, but that's a different kind of thing.
How close does actual combat come to cardio?
Not close at all. Nope. Nope. It is not cardiovascular at all. It's way too high. Way too high. It's most fighting. It's not technically anaerobic, meaning that you're actually in an anaerobic state, but it's considered an anaerobic exercise because it doesn't utilize that oxidative metabolism, the ability to burn fat for fuel, well enough to be considered cardiovascular. And that's part of the definition of a cardiovascular activity as well, is that you can actually start to use the oxygen to burn fat into fuel. What happens is when you're fighting, demand for energy is so high, the body does not have time to convert fat into glucose. It has to go to glucose in the blood, glycogen in the muscles. It has to go to those sources immediately for fuel. But if you've been fighting for any period of time, 3 months or more, most of us in here I think have been fighting more than 3 months, your muscles are well adapted. They're well adapted. They know what you're going to do. They train themselves to do it. Muscles, like some people, are like circus poodles. You train them to do a trick, and they're going to do that trick over and over and over and over, whether you want them to or not, which is a whole other subject. So you don't need to worry about developing that. The best thing to do for that is to fight. So you'll develop the feel for that. What we're talking about with the cardio activities in relation to fighting is being able to get that heart rate to recover. We're talking about increasing your ability to recover during a fight. 30 seconds of fighting, you back off, your opponent gives you 20 seconds while you guys figure out who's got the upper hand. You're both circling, you're both looking for that upper hand. While you're doing this, while you're backing off and looking at your opponent, your heart rate's recovering. Your heart rate's slowing down. You're getting oxygen to the muscles you just burned up. You're getting more sources of glycogen to the muscles that are working. So when you go back and engage, your opponent's tired, you're not. You're going to be fresh in the fight. That's endurance. We don't care how high your heart rate goes. I think somebody's grandmother would get their heart rate high. We care how quickly it goes down. And aerobic base building is the key to that. So, done that with grandmas. Yeah, come on, grandmas, let's go. So that's the basis, that's the beginning of it, but that's not the end of cardiovascular training, of endurance training for fighting. Okay? That's the beginning. So the first thing is you've got to build that aerobic base. Find a cardiovascular activity that you can do at a moderate intensity. Go with that perceived exertion. Don't worry about your heart rate. Okay? Ignore it. You get on the elliptical and you grab the heart rate machine and it says your heart rate's this, and the machine says you're supposed to be, it has those numbers on there. It says you should be between 117 and 140. You can just ignore that. Everybody's heart is completely different. I've done so many cardiovascular tests. I've done more than 200. I've never seen anybody with a heart rate anything close to another guy. I've seen big guys with heart rates as high as hummingbirds. I've seen tiny little girls with heart rates their hearts are barely beating. So it makes no difference. Anatomy's anatomy. Everybody's wired differently. Plumbing's different. So ignore that. Go by that perceived exertion rate. If it feels right, you're breathing comfortably, you should be able to sing, talk, yawn, that sweat going, you're fine. Once you've got that aerobic base built, here's how you test it. Okay? Very simple. Go to the gym, take your pulse for a full 60 seconds. Get that full count. Everybody knows how to take a pulse, right? Pretty easy. Get that full 60-second count. Remember what that count was. Get on the treadmill and sprint as hard as you can for a minute. 30 seconds, a minute. Go as hard, as fast as you can. Take your heart rate again. Usually, you should be so wiped out, you'll have to use the machine to take a heart rate. Okay? Then time it. How fast does that heart rate drop? It should drop 30 beats in under a minute. At least 20 beats under a minute. Anything less than that, you haven't got your base. You need to do more base training. Okay? It's that simple. Just look how fast your heart rate recovers. That's what we're after, is that increased heart rate recovery. That's what we want. That's endurance.
What is that test called again?
Well, the test we used to do is called a graduated cardio test. It's a graduated cardio test, and if you get online, you'll find some different ones. If you go to the actual American Council on Exercise, go to their website, they may have some of these tests posted. It's not a difficult test if you and a friend want to get together and run it. It doesn't take any special training to do it. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty simple test. You just need to have somebody there being able to watch you. You want a heart monitor when you do it, because you have to actually monitor heart rate. And it'll give you an actual, and it's pretty accurate actually. It was usually within 12 to 15% of an actual VO2 submaximal test.
So one thing I noticed when I was training is that I was going on time at heart rate, which is what I was seeking from my cardio training.
Yeah.
And I found that it kept getting harder and harder to get my heart rate there, which is one of the reasons why the heart rate is a leader.
Yeah. Yeah, what happens is as you improve that aerobic base, your heart rate's going to drop.
Yeah.
And so it's going to say, well, you got your heart rate up to this, and it's going to be a little tricky getting it up because your heart's more efficient. It doesn't have to beat as hard. That's a good thing. Until you get really low, which does happen. We do have athletes who train their heart rates down to nearly stopping.
So, getting that heart rate while, you pretty much have to have a heart rate monitor for the recovery part of it, right? Because if you're going to try to count a full minute while you're in recovery, you're not ever going to get an accurate count.
Yeah, you need to have a heart rate monitor, or if you're on an elliptical machine,
Okay.
use the monitor on that.
Just go real slow and just enough to keep it going. And,
No, you want to stop.
Okay.
Stop. Just stop. Don't stop. Boom, because you get a thing we call blood pooling. Yeah. But yeah, stop a little bit, slow down, and then take it. Give yourself a minute to kind of slow down a little bit and then take it. Yeah, you'll need a heart rate monitor, or if you've got the machine should have a monitor. If you're on a treadmill, you're going to have that there, or you're going to have to do the count on the pulse. That's tricky, but you can do it. You can do it.
All right, so the heart rate monitor itself is fine on the machines. It's just that maximum rate is not good.
Yeah, don't go by that. Yeah. You can. Yeah, definitely. If you have a heart monitor, use it. Definitely use it. We see an actual improvement in performance with people who actually use heart rate monitors when they do their cardio activity. You actually see a big difference. But don't go by the thing. Don't go by what they're telling you. Don't go by any of the numbers. Go by perceived exertion. If it feels too high for you, it's too high. If it feels too low, it's too low. So just go by that perceived exertion. Perceived exertion is a big component of a graduated cardio test. That's one of the things we look at. So don't go by that. Go by the numbers. Okay?
So you're talking about this 12-week period of just running or whatever.
Yep.
Are you allowed to do anything else? Can you lift weights? Can you,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's not going to interfere with, you do that on opposite days or the same day, or?
You can do it on the same day. Your lifting program is separate. It uses a different, again, weightlifting uses mostly glucose and glycogen again for functioning. It's not cardiovascular. It's not going to use that oxygen metabolism, so you're not going to interfere with that. But what's going to happen after, but let me tell you what you want to do after the 12-week period for fighting. Okay? After you get done with this 12-week period, let's say it doesn't take you 12 weeks, let's say it takes 8. You go in, you do the test, you get a good recovery rate, your heart rate's dropping 30 beats, or 25 beats in under a minute. That's pretty good. Does that fairly routinely, you feel pretty comfortable with that. So now what? You're going to move on to a higher intensity training a couple days a week. And you're going to gradually step away from that base building program. Now you can start upping the intensity. lowering the duration of time you spend on the treadmill. Now you can start running. Now you can start doing something heavier. Because now you're going to start conditioning with that oxidative metabolism. Now you can start increasing cardiovascular strength. You can start increasing lung capacity. And what you're going to find is it's going to be easier to do that. It's going to be easier to perform. Ultimately, the best kind of cardio program for a fighter is interval training. Does anybody here do interval training now? Yeah. Interval training is the best one to do. It actually, this goes to another rule I'm going to talk about here in a minute called specificity, which in athletics means, very simply, you want to train your body specifically in the fashion that it's going to have to perform in the sport. There's got to be, should be a correlation between the two. Sometimes that means the sport itself, but we don't go throw boxers in a swimming pool. Sometimes we do. If we need to shake up the system a little bit, but we don't do that on a regular basis. We don't make marathon runners swim. We don't make swimmers run. Specificity. So, interval training simulates what your heart rate goes through when you fight. It goes up really high, really quickly, and then it has to come down really quickly. Here's the deal. If you don't have an aerobic base, you're wasting your time interval training. Because the key to interval training is having that heart rate come down quickly enough for you to begin another interval. Does that make sense? If your heart rate won't recover, you can't start another interval. Interval training, also, the way I run interval training, if you got notes, if you want to write this down, and I'll remind you, I can tell you if you want later, come up and catch me. What you want to do for interval training, one interval is this: 3 minutes at your lowest rate. So at that base building rate, whatever that was, let's say that's on a treadmill that's walking at 3.5 on the treadmill. Okay? 3 minutes at that rate. 2 minutes at a higher rate. Let's say 4.8, maybe 5, so a light jog. 2 minutes there. 1 minute at a fast jog, slow run. 6 maybe on the treadmill, 6.5. 1 minute at a full out run. That usually means over 8 on the treadmill, so over 8 miles an hour. 30 seconds maxed out. 30 seconds, not just maxed out, 30 seconds in anaerobic state. You want to be anaerobic. That means your body is not burning any oxygen at all. Do not do that longer than 30 seconds. If you are anaerobic in your training for more than a minute and a half, you will actually kill healthy tissue in your body. You can damage your heart. 30 seconds, because if you do that, you'll push that anaerobic threshold up. But you just nudge it. A lot of people get in there and go anaerobic for 5 minutes. And those are the runners you hear about. Say, you hear about Bob, he ran every day and then he had a heart attack on the road. Yeah, Bob was running like crazy. You can damage your heart. Remember, exercise is damaging the body just slightly. Just enough to provoke a healthy response. So, 30 seconds anaerobic. After that 30 seconds, you start over again. So after that last 30 seconds, your heart rate's going to drop down to where it was on the first 3 minutes. And you don't begin another interval until your heart rate's down to where it was when you started. So if your heart rate takes, I know, I've seen people took 5 minutes to get down that low. Your interval takes less time than that. You're not spending enough time interval training, you're spending more time getting your heart rate recovered. So make sure you've got that aerobic base before you begin interval training.
Wait, let me see if I get this straight. Start at 3 minutes at the regular pace, then a little fast, a little fast, a little faster.
Yep.
Then you get to the point at 30 seconds, you're just flat out.
Flat out, hard and as fast as you possibly can.
And then you stop, go into recovery, and then start back at 3 minutes again.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not a stair step where you go up that 30 seconds, then back it off a little bit.
Nope.
And you stop,
Stop with
recover,
the heart
start
recovery.
over.
Yep.
Now, is it a dead stop or is it kind of a slow down?
No,
stop?
go back to the speed you were at when you started. So if you're at 3.5 when you did that first 3 minutes on the treadmill, after you hit that 30 seconds, take it back to 3.5.
Oh, and that avoids the blood pooling thing.
Yes.
Yeah, you just walk at that
Right.
slow
What's
pace
blood
until you
pooling?
hit your heart rate.
Okay.
Blood pooling is when you are engaged in really heavy physical activity, your blood is getting pumped back up to your heart through contractions in your leg muscles. The leg muscles actually massage the veins and force the blood back up to the heart. So when they're working really heavily, they're pushing a lot of blood up, and then you stop and they stop moving. The blood settles in your feet, not in your head.
So you faint.
And you faint. Blood pooling itself is, this is what I tell you, blood pooling is not dangerous, it won't hurt you, because once you faint, you're going to go back to normal. Yeah, blood pooling's not dangerous, it's the sudden stop after blood pooling that's dangerous. Any other questions on that?
Well, I just want to get one thing clear.
Yeah.
When you do this test to check your heart rate, you should get it up to,
When you do the graduated cardio test?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what you do on a graduated cardio test. If I do a graduated cardio test for you, have you come in, you put a heart monitor on you,
right?
put you on a treadmill. I'd start you off walking at a walking pace,
Yeah.
and I'd ask you how you feel between 1 and 10. And say 10 is, this is 10. 10 was this. Yeah, that's 10. 1 is, I don't feel anything. I'm barely moving.
Okay.
Okay, we do that for 3 minutes. I'd increase the speed, and again ask you. And every 3 minutes I'd increase until I got this. While you're doing that, I've got the watch part of the heart monitor. By the way, if you get a heart monitor, get the one with the watch, the wristband. Don't get the finger one. That does not work. I would see what your heart rate was when you said, at this heart rate you told me you were at a 5. That's your base.
That's, okay.
That's how it works.
Would be your workout heart rate, and that's what you would say, okay, I'm at that rate.
I'm at base. Yep.
And now I stop, slow down, whatever.
And try to maintain that heart rate for as long as you can.
Well, what I'm saying is when I want to check to see how my recovery rate is.
What you'll do is you'll just look at where your heart rate's at. If you have a heart monitor on, go down to a recovery speed. So if you're at a jog, go down to a slow walk. Watch it drop. Just count it. Take the pulse at the time. Check the time until you've done 1 minute and see how many beats you drop.
So you measure recovery at base to rest?
Yeah.
As opposed to...
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you want to get back down to that lowest rate possible. Okay, any other questions?
That just all confused me. So, when you're looking at measuring your recovery in 55 seconds,
Yeah.
and you're shooting for the magic 30, this is from the height of your...
This is from whatever maximum heart rate you attain.
And so if you're doing interval training, it would be
At
at
30.
the end of the 30 seconds.
Yep.
And hopefully you're not unconscious or you send out someone to help you.
Yeah.
And 55 seconds to a minute, you back down from 175
You're 30 beats down.
to 140.
145. You'll be 30 beats down. That may not be full recovery rate. Okay? That may not be where you go back and start. Usually it takes about 2 minutes.
That's an indicator, a measurement
Yeah.
of how efficient or...
How much, that's a measure of how much oxygen the heart muscle is getting. Yeah.
So you may, when you return back to the 3 minutes of going slow on a walk, it'll drop further after that time.
Yeah.
Down to whatever.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, probably. Unless you're at 145 when you start. I see people doing that. That depends on the size of your heart, stroke volume, and things like that.
So that is just an indicator.
It's just an
There's a couple
indicator.
things you can measure and go, oh, I'm here.
Yep. That heart rate is just an indicator. It just kind of lets you know what's going on in the body. That's all it is. It's not indicative of anything else in particular unless you know you've got a heart condition.
You were also saying that a method of finding your base heart rate is to go for a certain period of time and say, I'm still not feeling it, and then you go another period of time.
You can just go straight to that 30 seconds. If you want to get an idea of how well your recovery rate is now, get on the treadmill, sprint as hard as you can for 30 seconds. Before you start, you look at your pulse, sprint for 30 seconds, take your pulse, then time how long it takes you to get back down.
Right, but I thought you were talking with them about how to determine what your base heart rate is.
That would determine your base.
So
If you wanted,
you
if
say, I feel this, and you look down and there's your heart rate, and that's what you should
you can do that too, yeah. Because basically when I'm doing the cardio test on him, I'm doing perceived exertion on him. I'm just actually matching it to a heart rate, so that when we're done, what I do is I'll do a further calculation. I'll give him a range. I'll say your base is between 115 and 125. So when you're doing your base training, keep it between 115 and 125. And it's just to give you a number. It's just to give you something to look at.
Right.
Yeah, really, we're still going off perceived exertion. He's still telling me how he feels when his heart rate was at that level.
Right.
So you don't need to do a graduated cardio test. You can just straight go to perceived exertion, and you'll tinker it. Don't be afraid to adjust it. You know, if you're not noticing an improvement, you might try going slower and backing off. Because again, most people's inclination is to go a little harder than they should. So you might try backing it off. So adjust it, play with it. You're not stuck to anything in particular when you're just going off that perceived exertion rate. But there are tests you can get that will give you a number. You can talk to trainers and get an idea, and they'll give you an actual number. So
If you're on a treadmill, what would be a decent speed to start with? 3.5?
yeah, 3.5. I want to start off at least at a good brisk walk. Try that first. That might even be too much, depending on the individual. You may have to back off of that. But a good brisk walk between 3.5. If you're shorter, 3.2. Seriously, I have, one of my squires is, one of my ex-squires, former squires, just got married a couple years ago, is 6'9". 3.5 on him, he's like, he's walking into the thing. Yeah. Crank that up a little, will you? Yeah. He goes and runs marathons. I was like, man, that's not fair. You know you're cheating?
It's a hammer.
Yeah.
Is he left-handed too? 'Cause that's
So any more questions on that? On cardio?
I do treadmill, bicycle, and rowing. And I noticed, like, for me with rowing, I can row for, like, ever.
Wow.
And what's the big difference between the equipment? I mean, I feel like I'm pushing as much, if not harder, on the rower than I am on the other two.
But the rowing feels easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's you. It's not equipment.
Yeah, well,
There's a big difference in the equipment, but it's that some of the muscles involved for fighting are the same muscles that are involved in rowing. So your body can go, oh, we can use the glycogen we've got stored in these muscles in order to get this task accomplished. I mean, look, the human body is a massively lazy thing. It's like water. It wants the path of least resistance all the time. I mean, all the time. If you give it an inch, it'll take a mile. It'll find a way to screw you over. Exercise is not about being efficient at all. Exercise is about being as inefficient as possible and forcing that body to go, hey, what? We can't do that. Like, yeah, I know you can't do that. Let's do this. That's cross training. That's cross training. Cross training is all about that. I got guys going, okay, I'm going to start my cross training class, but I got to be able to do more reps. We're like, you're not going to you can't be prepared to do cross training. That's the whole point of cross training, is that when you go in and do that program, they got you all over the map. They get you doing exercises you never even heard of before, and have you doing it at an intensity level that, again, you're near anaerobic threshold. There's no way to prepare for that. That's the whole point. That's why it's a great system. That's why all the guys in the 300 movie, right? Everybody can do, I want that workout. I'm like, no, leave me alone. I don't have enough huge tires for that program in this gym. That's all that was that's all it was a cross training program. A really evil, formed in the bowels of hell. That those guys were on. So,
and they got paid very well.
And they did. They got paid a lot to do it. Yeah. They paid me that much. I might do it.
When you're looking for other sports to get training ideas from, what sport do you think matches SCA fighting the best?
Boxing.
Boxing.
Yeah, I do a lot of boxing now with one of my squires. Boxing, yeah, footwork, endurance. It trains the systems that you need to have prepared for fighting. When doing my research on medieval fighting techniques and incorporating them into SCA fighting, discovered something. Hey, fighting's fighting. Human body's the human body. It's been the same for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So the same kind of things always come back around. And so boxing, first of all, even if you just, I do more time on a heavy bag than I do on a pellet. Just to develop footwork and develop combinations, develop that hand-eye coordination, and most importantly, the endurance, the stamina. This is the important part of that. And boxing is pretty intense. So boxing is my first choice on that.
So if you look at weight training routines for boxing, you think that those would be good weight training routines for
Yep. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about, about weight training for fighting in the SCA too. Weight training is kind of a different animal than cardiovascular training. It's not going to use the oxidative metabolism at all. You'll hear trainers tell you it will. It doesn't. It doesn't. If you know biology, you're going, what? How does that even work? You're not. Nobody. Take 5 pounds and lift it, do bicep curls for 10 minutes, I dare you. After 90 seconds, I've taken guys, huge guys, given them 10 pounds and said, made them curl for 90 seconds. They're in tears. They go, why does this hurt so badly? That's lactic acid. You know the pain you have the day after you train? That's not to be lactic acid. That's a pleasure compared to actual lactic acid. Lactic acid burn is, you know it, it's awful. So you can't do it long enough, a sustained period enough, to actually get any kind of weight training benefits, except in the legs. The legs will do it with cardio. You can get an endurance training program in the legs. So there's different types of weight training. When people come in and go, I need to do weight training, the one they think of is what we call true strength. That's the ability, the amount of force I can exert on an object, and that is, to this day, for some reason, still invested in bodybuilding. Most weight training routines you see are designed, come from a bodybuilding base. The idea is hypertrophy of the muscle. Get the muscle bigger, right? Get it stronger. Well, it does get stronger, and it will get bigger. But what else is it doing? What else are we doing to accomplish that? Not helping out. So there's 3 different types of weight training you can do for muscles. You can do that, true strength. You can do power. You can lift for power. So power lifters, for example. If you see Olympic power lifters, they vary in size. You can have very small power lifters. In fact, shorter power lifters generally tend to do better than taller ones. They may not have huge muscles. You may not see them having big muscles. Powerlifting will not hypertrophy the muscle. Okay? And you can do endurance lifting. That is, you can train the muscle to just simply repeat a contraction over and over for an extended period of time. Here's how this works. Okay? Everybody heard the term fast twitch muscle fiber, slow twitch muscle fiber. This goes on in the SCA, this talk goes on in the SCA all the time. I actually had to stop a class in a rapier, a class on rapier because they were teaching, hey, fast twitch is the muscles that make you go like this. And slow twitch is the muscles that make you move like this. And I was like, no. A twitch is an anatomical term for a muscle. It just simply means a muscle contraction followed by a single rest. That's what a twitch means. When you're talking to a physical therapist and he says twitch, he doesn't mean twitch. He means a single contraction followed by a rest. So I bend my arm, I relax my arm, that's a twitch. Fast twitch muscle fiber is muscle that provides a very powerful contraction. A very fast, powerful contraction. Slow twitch muscle fiber provides a very slow but long sustained contraction. The human body is a mix of the two. You will hear people say, well, your legs are all fast twitch. Well, if your legs were all fast twitch, we couldn't walk more than 30 yards before collapsing. Okay? Chicken breast, turkey breast, white meat, right? Yeah. They don't fly. That's because their breasts are fast twitch muscle fiber. That's because when a turkey gets scared and it goes flap, 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 and it hits the ground, it's exhausted its energy potential. That's it. If our legs were fast twitch muscle fiber, I'd run for 12 feet and literally collapse on the ground. It's not the way it works. You'll hear trainers talk about that. They will talk about red muscle fiber. That's slow twitch muscle fiber. It is actually very red. It's very dark. It has a high glycotic value. In other words, it stores lots of glucose in the form of glycogen. That's why dark meat has that kind of bitter kind of flavor to it. It has more of that packed in it. Okay? So, the human body is a mix. We have a mix of that. Every muscle you have has a little bit of both. Again, varying on genetics and things like that to a varying degree. But some people, for a lot of men, we have a lot of slow twitch in our legs. Lots. Particularly the gastric. I've had guys come and go, I want big calves. I never get big calves. And I say, and you never will. Have a nice day. Because if you don't have enough fast twitch muscle fiber in your gastric, you can't hypertrophy it. Slow twitch muscle fiber will not hypertrophy. It will not get it. Can't do it. Only the fast twitch muscle fiber hypertrophies. So when you're lifting, and you're lifting to true strength, you're only working fast twitch muscle fiber. That's all you're working. You're not really touching the slow twitch muscle. That's why when they lift and you'll hear them say this, if you lift and you don't hit failure, everybody's familiar with that sensation. You ever had that with the barbell? And it goes up and suddenly everything just shuts off. You go, what's going on? It's coming down and there's just nothing you can do. That's, yeah, you push till you can't push anymore. That's fast twitch muscle fiber. You've exhausted its energy potential. It functions, also functions on glucose, but it also functions on the phosphocreatine system. That big explosive energy. It doesn't store a lot of glucose, but it's has more phosphocreatine potential in it, so it can boom. That's why guys taking creatine for lifting, you get that extra, right? You can train for creatine. Don't take those supplements. You don't need that. But that's what they're taking it for. They're trying to maximize that phosphocreatine system in that fast twitch muscle, so they get. That initial lift is the hardest lift. When you're doing doing a clean and press, it's the clean that's the hardest part. You need that explosion to get that weight up off the ground, that initial resistive gravity. So that's why you take the creatine for that. For SCA fighters, for the majority, if you think about how you fight, think about what muscles do what. You're not going to lift every muscle group exactly the same. And again, it depends on. This is going to depend on people individually and what you kind of feel like you want to do with your lifting program and how you want it to affect you in fighting. The bulk of your lifting should be endurance training. You should be training the muscles to be able to repeat a contraction over and over and over, specifically.
Low weight, high reps.
Low weight, high reps, yep. Specifically the chest, the back, the biceps, the legs, quads, hamstrings. Those should be done for endurance. They're holding up weight. If you're wearing a lot of armor, if your armor's particularly heavy, if you're not running around in sport armor, if your armor's whatever, you've got that weight on your shoulders, you're holding up a shield, and you're holding a sword in a charged position, that's going to cause, that's endurance right there, to be able to do that. Having a huge bicep is not going to help you hold up a shield, because I don't really hold it with my bicep, I'm holding it in my chest. What I need this to do is to do this, to be able to do this and respond and not get tired. Shoulders and triceps, on the other hand, you might want to lift a little more for strength. The tricep straightens the arm. You want some power, you want some snap, you want some contraction in that. It's being fired, unless you're swinging non-stop all the time, which you'd have to be doing for more than, say, in excess of like 5 minutes at a time. I don't think anybody's doing that. Hopefully you can't suck that back. You got to kill the guy. So. You want your triceps going to give you that power, that pop. So triceps and shoulders, a little more strength. But more importantly, in the shoulders, shoulder injuries have got to be the biggest fighter injury in the SCA. I think after knee, maybe right, and then knees following that, knees and ankles, lower back, in that order maybe. Gets maybe moved around, but shoulders, I see people throwing their shoulders out all the time. Build some muscle on the shoulder. Work your shoulders a little bit hard. Hypertrophy the muscle a little bit. This joint is the weakest joint in the body. It's in a really shallow joint. That's why we get such great mobility out of it. When you're young, okay, particularly guys, when you're in your 20s, are prone to dislocating. That's no big deal. I've seen guys in their 20s dislocate their shoulder. Their parents freak. And I'm like, it's no big deal. Because in their early 20s, men are still growing. Women have stopped, but men can actually get a growth spurt in their early 20s. I don't know if guys, I did. I don't know if other people here did too. So the growth plates are still pushing some room between the joint. At our age, it tears. And you wish it dislocated. And you can have severity of tears. You can have a minor tear that they'll put in a sling and they'll say pack with ice. Somebody probably have that. Or you can have a tear that goes along with what we call an avulsion fracture, which is where the muscle pulls so hard it splinters the bone like cordwood. Cracks it lengthwise. Yeah. That's how bad they can get. That is a fight ender. You are on the sidelines with that. The muscle that holds this in is the rotator cuff. Okay, everybody's heard the rotator cuff, right? Yeah. Rotator cuff is 4 muscles. And they mostly come down from around the back, around the scapula, around the front. One of them comes down along the top, kind of parallel to the clavicle. One comes underneath, kind of comes around the front. They don't hold it here at all. So most Shoulder dislocations are anterior dislocations. The shoulder dislocates forward because the rotator cuff is holding it together in the back. The rotator cuff is a very small muscle. Its main job is to hold your joint together under force. That's its main job. But if I take a weight in my hand over 3 pounds and I hold it out like that, my rotator cuff is done and my deltoids are holding that weight. Because the rotator cuff, that's going to work all that rotator cuff in the posterior of the shoulder.
What about like punching? If you're, you have like the long cable thing for punching like that.
It's not going to work there.
No? What does that work then?
Deltoids. Anterior deltoid and a little bit of the lateral. Yeah. Rotator cuff does this. That's its second job. It rotates the arm in the shoulder joint.
That's the sits muscles, the superciliaris.
Sits, yep. Sits. Yep. Sits muscle is what they call it too. Yep, that's what it does. This is what it does. Now it's interesting about the rotator cuff. It's one of the only muscles in the body that the range of motion is determined by the strength of the muscle. Most of your range of motion is determined by flexibility in the joint. But the rotator cuff is determined by the strength. The stronger your rotator cuff is, the greater range of motion you'll get here. More secure, the stronger it is. So you want to work that separately from your deltoid. So cable, cross cable, resistance tubing, anything, if you're going to do a weight, you've got to be on the ground. So you've got to have gravity. So if I'm going to use a barbell, I've got to be on the ground. And I've got to have this resistance to lift this way. Does that make sense?
And you want to do a full range, right?
You want to go as far as is comfortable. Is comfortable. You don't want to go to the point where it starts to pull too hard, because you can rip your rotator cuff.
And you want your elbow against your waist?
Yes,
Keep
absolutely.
it there. Yeah.
If this goes away from your waist, you're using your deltoid. Correct. It's all about form. Form, when it comes to weightlifting of all kinds, is the critical part. It doesn't really matter how much you lift. It doesn't really matter how many reps you do. If the form sucks, you're not getting the benefit of it. And most people's form sucks because, again, your body's going to find a way to cheat. Don't let it cheat. Talk to somebody about form. I don't have, obviously can't go through all the resistance training exercises today, but get some help on those.
Now, when you're talking about lifting weights for endurance, as you progress, and you need to increase the weight and increase repetitions.
Increase the repetitions and decrease the resting time between the repetitions. So, if I'm doing, let's say you're doing 90 pounds for endurance on your chest, you're pressing 90 pounds, it's not really a lot of weight. You're going to do a full 20 reps, and ultimately you'll go to a point where there's no rest. You'll do 20, catch a breath, do 20, catch a breath, do 20, catch a breath. You'll start off no more than 30 seconds between sets when you're doing endurance training. 30 seconds maximum. Instead of increasing the weight, decrease the resting time between the sets. So you can do it that way. You can do the 20 with a low weight, or you can do time under load. Time under load, some people like, you don't count reps. When we count reps, we're just, when a trainer counts reps on somebody, we're just keeping track of time, trying to time how much stress we're putting that muscle under. You can go the 90-second route. There's a lot of people, I've done both. They both work pretty well. The 90 seconds is where you really build up lactic acid burn. So if you want to feel that.
You just keep going until you hit.
You just keep lifting.
Until you hit DMF, total muscle failure.
No, you shouldn't hit muscle failure on endurance training. No muscle failure. You should be able to keep going.
But it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt bad. You're going to want to stop. You're going to want to stop. And I see people do stop when it starts to burn. Lactic acid is a product of anaerobic activity of the muscle. And you can actually train, it's good to train into the lactic acid burn because you can build up your resistance to it. You can build up your resistance to lactic acid. Your body can start converting lactic acid into fuel because it's lactic. It's a form of glucose. The body can use that for fuel. And it increases your pain threshold. It literally increases your pain threshold. You're able to resist more pain if you work through that lactic acid burn. And believe me, yeah, what most people feel the next day after you've done lifting is that soreness. We call that delayed onset muscle soreness. There's still a debate about what it is. I've never heard a definitive answer. Some people think it's microficial tears in the muscle, the surface of the muscle, that's causing some inflammation. That's just one example. That's not definitive by any means. We don't really know what it is. We know it's not harmful. Lactic acid burn will go away almost immediately when you stop. It should subside immediately. If it doesn't, you've learned something. But it should go away immediately. But it hurts. I mean, it will make you cry. The first time you feel a real lactic acid burn, it's painful. It just sucks. So, yeah, high reps, low weight. Again, you can do time under load. You can do the 90 seconds of endurance. 3 sets. Okay, you want to do 3 sets. Time between doing these exercises. This is about letting your body recover. You develop the strength, whether it be endurance or true strength or power, in the recovery phase of lifting, not during the lifting. You can go 4 days between lifting and get maximum benefits that way. So, no more than 5 days apart. I only lift 2 days a week. I lift on Mondays and I lift on Fridays. And that's it. I do all my lifting on Monday, I do all my lifting on Friday. All of it. And it takes me about 30 minutes to do all my lifting. But I give myself 4 days between, because the more rest I get, the more results I will get, the better results I will get. That's more time. As I rest between those 2 sets, I see this increase. As soon as I lift again, I start over. So if I go every other day, I'm constantly interrupting the recovery process, and I'm not giving my body time to generate healthy new tissue in response to that.
Can you start weight training at the same time you start your base training?
Yep, no problem. Start
Still lift
the
on Friday if you're gonna fight, something they care about that weekend?
Yep. Still do.
Would that interval increase as you age due to how long it takes you to recover?
Nope, no difference. Age and resistance training almost has no effect on resistance training, except that as we age, we lose muscle mass. But they've done studies between a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old, and respected to their age, in other words, it's respected to the amount of muscle mass they have at that time in their lives, they got the same results in the same amount of time. There was no difference in the results they got. None. So, doesn't matter. No. In fact, as you age, you should really make lifting a priority. Particularly ladies. Lifting is critical for women as they age. Yeah, it fights osteoporosis. You can take all the calcium supplements in the world. It won't do you any good if you're not weightlifting. You have to do resistance training to metabolize the calcium you take. Otherwise it won't work. You're just, as we say, you got expensive pee.
Kind of a selfish question. Labral tears. Is there any shoulder exercise you can do to try to prevent labral tears, or is that just bad technique that causes labral tears?
It's mostly bad technique, but when you start, it's this. When guys are doing shoulder presses, okay, when the guys are doing lateral raises, they'll do this. And they'll throw that way up over their head, okay? As soon as this elbow goes above this joint is now under maximum stress. The leverage is more than it can bear. At the very least, I'm going to end up with a shoulder impingement. And when you fight, you go like this and you feel that, I've got shoulder impingement now. You feel that click in your shoulder. That is the head of your humerus, right? Hitting your acromial process. It's sliding up and clicking on the point of your collarbone. And that's not a good sign. That's something you want, that's a warning sign saying,
That's a lot, I never noticed that before.
Great! Well, nothing else to worry about.
I was pretty positive I tore my labrum just from bad
Yep.
shot throwing.
Yep.
So I was just
Keep
wondering if
going,
there's any
keep
shoulder-
going,
Yeah,
it's
you're
happening
bad.
in my shoulders. I want to hear more, how do I train that out or prevent for anything?
Once you got it, okay. Impingement, it's a ligament problem. It's a problem with the ligaments. Ligaments connect bone to bone. Once the ligament's stretched, it's stretched. And nothing sort of surgery is going to bring it back. Ligaments are very non-vascular. Okay? Tendons are highly vascular. That's why tendons, when you tear a tendon, it hurts so bad and it goes nice and ugly and bruises, but it's going to heal. Torn ligament hurts so bad because the bone's grinding against itself. It's not actually the ligament you're actually feeling. It's very non-vascular. They don't heal very well. So, strengthen with muscles. Add that extra support. Shoulder exercises done with good form. Lateral raises are the best, but lateral raises that high and no higher. You see guys doing this all the time, or even a little bit above. Just come parallel to the floor. Every physical therapist in the world will tell you not to go higher than this. There's no, once you start coming up, you do not want weight in your hands. Nothing over 5 pounds, 10 pounds. like that, that's going to start aggravating that shoulder. So start building up that shoulder muscle. 2 sets, 8 to 10 reps, or time under load should get to failure in under 60 seconds. So you want to lift to failure in the shoulders. You want to lift to the point where you can't lift anymore. I will do 8 reps on my shoulders. If I don't fail within 8 reps, I increase the weight.
Those machines in the gym where you can go like this.
Those are okay. Realize though that when they're straight. So don't go by. So if you're doing 40 pounds on this guy, you go, wow, I'll pick up 220s. Ah! You know, no, it's not the same. So be careful about that.
Other than a standard balanced diet, does any of this training change your nutritional needs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's another thing I wanted to get to too, is talk about nutrition as well. Yeah, nutritional needs change considerably. Nutrition, I'm not going to talk about weight loss, okay, because that's a whole other animal. I'm just going to talk about nutrition for fighters and sustaining this kind of level, increased level of activity. Obviously, your calories are going to go up. They are not going to go up. They're not going up 2 cheeseburgers a day up. Beer. Yeah.
So what would you then?
Yeah. You know this, Italy did a study. They took marathon runners. I swear to God, they took marathon runners and they had them run a marathon, so the full 26 miles. And they did 2 groups. They did a group A that rehydrated along the way with water, and they did group B that rehydrated with beer. And after 2 hours, the beer drinkers rehydrated faster than the water drinkers. After 2 hours.
But they feed more, right?
I don't know. If I gotta run full out for 2 hours to have 8 beer, I don't know.
Beer for 2 hours.
How bad do you want that beer?
Did you see that Nova special on
No. Yeah. So one thing that goes up is your protein needs. Endurance athletes need more protein than weightlifters. It's a common misconception that weightlifters need more protein. They don't. Endurance athletes are going to tax larger groups. Don't think of muscles as individuals. It's a system. It's the musculoskeletal system. A weightlifter taxes one part of that system. Endurance trainers tax the entire system. When you fight, you tax the whole system. When you do endurance training, and particularly when you begin doing interval training, you are really taxing the whole system. Increase your protein. There's different ways of measuring your protein. The only thing, I mean, you can get online and find out the different rates. There's a formula for determining how much, all of that. That's not that big a deal. You don't need to worry about that so much. What? Yeah. I had a friend who did that, trained powerlifters, and they had to do that every year. And I was like, no thanks. I'm not doing that. Core sample your muscle. Yeah, not nice.
Like biopsy punch?
Yeah.
biopsy muscle?
Yeah. I don't know, it looks like an 8-gauge needle. It's like a big steel tube. Just suck it out.
How?
Well, you just roast the soul out.
When you're looking at protein needs, people tend to still kind of go overboard on protein. First thing to remember is your body will not process more than 25 grams of protein per meal. So guys are doing that 40 grams, I'm drinking 40-gram power shakes. Like, great, that's 20 grams of fat you just made. 25 grams of protein is about the max the body will process, no matter what your protein needs are for the day. So after you're done lifting, after you're done activity, after your post-workout meal should include 25 grams of a low-fat protein. Low-fat because, obviously, fat's going to make that protein harder to digest. Fat's hard to digest. It's going to slow down that protein getting into your system. You want to get protein into that right away. You have an hour. They call it the window of time. It starts to shut as soon as you stop. You've got an hour to get protein into your system.
Does the type of fat matter as far as?
Saturated fat.
Okay.
Saturated fat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
saturated.
no bacon.
No bacon. Bacon does not count. Bacon and cheeseburgers don't count. So what's the best?
What form of protein is most?
The number one form of protein actually the body actually metabolizes the quickest is whey protein. Whey protein is one of the best. Cottage cheese is one of the best. Cottage cheese is a good one because it also is a natural source of glucosamine. Glucosamine helps the body from going catabolic. In other words, it helps your body using healthy tissue to rebuild injured tissue, which is something you want to avoid when you're weightlifting. Red meat is actually still one of the top proteins. Egg whites, and then poultry and fish.
So red meat is okay?
Red meat is okay.
Good.
It's not 10 pounds at a time.
Yeah, it's not 10 pounds at a time. Yeah.
What eggs?
Yeah, eggs are good. Not bacon. Eggs are great. Eggs are great, even with the yolks. By the way, there's never been a conclusive study that linked cholesterol in an egg yolk to human blood serum cholesterol.
Amen to that.
No correlation there.
Thank you. So, let's say you have like eggs and bacon.
No, if you eat the bacon with the egg, you slow down the egg. No bacon. Cut the bacon out.
After exercise.
After exercise.
You guys want to make me a breakfast tomorrow?
Yeah, 3 loads with bacon. Yeah, you want to have a pre-workout and a post-workout meal.
And you said 25 grams at every meal. How often can you take in 25 grams a day?
2 hours. Every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours.
That's 25 grams an ounce.
No, exactly. It's about, it works out to about a serving. It's about maybe about the size of the palm of your hand. It depends on what it is. Obviously, if it's a steak, it's going to be 4 ounces. Yeah, it's not a lot.
So to repeat this answer, 25 grams of protein per meal. So you can't metabolize more than 25 per meal.
Well, every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours.
So like a chicken breast or thigh or
Yep.
something?
Yep. Yep. Just one. And in 2 hours after that, have another one. Have more. That's fine. Your body will have the demand for that in another 2 hours.
Until how late? I mean, like right up until the time you go to sleep?
Sure.
Really?
Yep. Yeah, the whole idea about not eating before you sleep, and it accounts to weight loss. You know those ads where they go, burn weight in your sleep? Yeah, we do that now. Everybody does that now. Your body uses its fat reserves when you sleep. If you go to bed with a full stomach, it's just going to use that first. And so you're not going to see the weight loss you maybe want. You're going to give yourself a little weight loss boost. But again, we're not talking about weight loss here. I'm not talking about that. We're just talking about nutritional needs. But yeah, post-workout meal, 25 grams of protein.
Don't forget the water. If you're gonna increase
Oh yeah.
the protein, you're gonna increase water.
You've got to increase water. Yeah, because just like I mentioned earlier, protein, it's going to, when the body uses that, metabolizes that, it's going to break off that nitrogen, and you're going to urinate more. So yeah, but all of this training is going to require more water. Athletes need more water, not less. You're going to need more water, not less water. You're going to consume a lot more water. I go through a gallon and a half a day on heavy days, sometimes 2. And I've not yet, somebody in the SCA, they posted a list about water intoxication. And I was like, oh, you gotta be. That's the last thing we need to worry about in the SCA is water intoxication, yeah.
That's, yeah, that's.
Just intoxicated. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do you have any thoughts on water versus Gatorade?
Gatorade it was designed for people, for extreme athletes who are burning through their glucose and glycogen reserves, like I talked about, and needed it replenished immediately. So it had that sugar in it. We're not doing, even fighting the SCA, we're not doing anything close to that. Gatorade, I mean, you're just getting extra calories.
Water's better.
Water is better.
Speaking of calories, do you think, I mean, is there any real concern with total caloric intake on a daily basis other than weight gain? I mean,
There are some connections to disease risks. Yeah, to cancers, obviously heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and things like that. Yeah, they're starting to see correlations of that. I haven't seen a real definitive study that's come out yet, but we're starting to see that. So sometime in the next 2 years or so, you're going to hear about a study that's really going to link that to disease risks, increased caloric intake during the day.
isn't there a reverse caloric intake for longevity?
Yeah,
Eating less?
yeah. There are studies that are showing that if you eat less calories, you live longer.
2 questions. So you mentioned about extreme workouts.
Yeah.
And anything else besides protein?
When you're looking at, so your post and pre-workout, your post-workout should have protein in it. Your pre-workout doesn't necessarily have to have protein. I wouldn't add protein to your pre-workout meal. Again, because protein is a little difficult to digest. It's hard on the liver. It really is. So don't force that too much in the pre-workout meal. Carbohydrates, though, are the interesting thing. Your pre-workout meal should have a carbohydrate. Your post-workout meal should have a carbohydrate. You burned up, you're going to burn glycogen, you're going to burn glucose, and you need to replenish glucose after. It should be a simple carbohydrate, not a complex carbohydrate. Don't eat that, wheat bran muffin or
Is this
whatever.
both pre and post?
Yep. Simple carbohydrate in both. You want to get that glucose into your blood quick.
So you're talking like rice? Fruit.
Fruit is the best.
Fruit is the
Yeah,
best?
fruit is the best, but white. That's fine. Yeah, that's fine for a pre-workout because you want to get that glucose in there. You don't want to be metabolizing. The only thing about complex carbohydrates that makes them different, on the glucose, when they do the glucose ratings, brown rice and white rice have the same amount of glucose. Excuse me. They affect the blood sugar in exactly the same way. It's just brown rice, you have to process the husk off when you digest it, so it gets into the bloodstream slower. So you don't get that spike. But other than that, they're exactly the same. And it has the fiber, which we need. It has that non-soluble fiber, which we need.
Is there any difference in the temperature in which the room you work out in? Does that have any correlation at all to effectiveness?
It can. I think there's a debate about that. Obviously, they're saying that increased temperatures can increase muscle flexibility. That's why they do that yoga. Yeah, and they increase temperatures. But that's really hot. It's designed that you get muscle flow and help flexibility. So they're saying maybe they're theorizing it may help with injury prevention. But you'll see the exact same argument for cold. They got rid of ice baths for athletes. Have you heard about this thing they have now? I can't remember what it's called. It's brand new. They're marketing it to athletic teams. It's a chamber you get in, so your head sticks out, and they blow cold air on you to almost absolute zero.
What?
Well, I mean,
Absolutely.
absolute zero.
Sounds like they're worth it now.
They induce hypothermia in small doses. They give you hypothermia. Yeah, they induce hypothermia. They actually try to make the blood cool to the center of the body, so that when you get out, you've got all this oxygen-rich blood going to the muscles, and it helps aid recovery too. So you see the argument both ways. So I don't know.
Well, I just heard that since we measure food energy in calorie, which is a measure of heat,
Right.
and so I've heard that you want to diet, live in a 40-degree room, and you're going to burn more calories.
Well, the same goes true for if you live in a 90-degree room. You need calories to cool off too.
Yeah.
So you can go, again, it can go either way. But back to your pre-workout meal. So yeah, simple carbohydrate before you go and exercise. Half hour before you work out. No, not any closer than that. Give yourself time to digest that meal. It doesn't need to be really heavy in calories. Just something a little bit. Don't go work out on an empty stomach. That used to be the theory, is go out on an empty stomach. Don't do that.
So you're talking about the Coke?
Not a Coke. That's going to burn up real quick. But
Maybe a Wonder Bread jelly sandwich?
yeah, maybe so, or a fruit.
Want to avoid anything with
Just
that.
one. An apple. You could have a couple apples, an apple and an orange, or a banana, or something like that. It's got a little fiber in it. Again, that's going to help slow down how quickly it enters your bloodstream, so you don't burn out. But the sugars in fruit, or like I mentioned before, they're almost glucose.
Not vegetables.
You want
No, you can do a vegetable too. Certain
to
vegetables are like
avoid
that
things
too.
like peanut butter and that kind of stuff.
Before you work out, yeah.
Okay.
Anything that's going to have a large amount of fat in it, because it's going to slow down your digestion.
Okay.
It's going to prevent the nutrients you're going to get from your carbohydrate or your protein. It's not going to enter your bloodstream fast enough.
So, I'm getting a little confused as to what we're considering a workout. When we're talking about the aerobic base building, we don't want a lot of glucose being used in our bloodstream or glycogen being used in our muscles. Instead, we want to be burning fats. Should we have a different type of diet if we're going to move into one of those exercises, or is it just the intensity of the exercise is going to determine the systems you use?
You will burn through glucose usually within the first 10 to 20 minutes, regardless of what activity you're doing. Once you go from zero to activity, the body responds by burning glucose. Then after maybe 10-15 minutes, and when we did the VO2 maxes, we would see it. Glucose level would drop off, and either they would respond by increased lipid use, or they wouldn't. So for the first 10, 15 minutes of your exercise, no matter what you're doing, you're going to be all carbohydrates. The idea is that's why duration counts. And burning on the aerobic base, on getting extra oxygen by forcing your body to burn fat, that's why duration counts. You want to go longer to force yourself into that state where your body has to go. We're going to have to go into this fat now to get, we've got time to do it, we need to do it, let's do it. The body will go to those fat reserves. So you still want to have a simple carbohydrate before you go work out. That'll help you get through that 10, 15-minute phase. Make sure you got enough energy so you don't have a blood glucose drop in that first, you can have a blood glucose drop in that first 10 minutes. Take your Coke, will go right through you. 5 minutes in, you're like, you'll get that hypoglycemic reaction. You're not going to be able to continue exercising. So, yeah. You gotta go more than 10 minutes.
And then if that aerobic system really only kicks in after 15 or 20 minutes of exertion, it strikes me that with training maybe you can make that happen a little bit sooner, but it's not the kind of thing where you're going to start a fight, 3 minutes in you have a flurry, you have a 30-second break, and your body's not burning carbohydrates anymore. It seems to be more like you're in round 7, you're resting for round 8, that's when that kind of system will engage. Is that right?
It may not engage at all during fighting. The idea, though, is what's happening. The reason you train that aerobic base is because during aerobic base training, your body learns to it increases its efficiency with oxygen. It gets more oxygen into the bloodstream with every breath. So even if you're not in an aerobic state, even if you are fighting, you've increased the chemical composition, the oxygen in your blood. Your blood is oxygen rich. So that when you do stop and back off, and that heart can go from that intense, near anaerobic state and calm down. You're flooding with oxygen.
Glycogen faster.
Yeah, it's just a mechanism for getting more oxygen into the blood. That's all it is. The body says, we got to burn fat, we need oxygen to do that, let's increase the amount of oxygen we get to the blood. So we're only kind of going for a side effect of the aerobic base. We're not really going for the real effect, which is it makes people melt on that program. When they lose weight, they just go, when they do that combined with the diet.
Okay, so back to the pre-workout meal. We got a simple carb, what else?
Well, you could go with a protein, again, a low fat, lean protein, but really just a simple carbohydrate. It doesn't have to be much. Yeah, it doesn't have to be too much.
And post-workout?
You want a protein and water and another simple carbohydrate. Now you can have your Coke.
Where exactly does beer?
That's not carbohydrate.
It's the simplest carbohydrate.
Yeah, it's a very exactly. Hey, you use already alcohol for energy for a while. You live on just alcohol for a year or so.
Earlier you said that you could do your base building at several intervals during the day. Do they have to be more than that 15 or 20 minutes to get beyond the initial?
You got to at least get into that state. 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes you do it that day, you'll trigger it. You can go back an hour later. Your body will respond as if it'll still have happened. The body will be ready to go into that.
But what about the sugar burning process and the switch from the carbohydrate?
We see people go back and forth all the time. It's really weird. We'll say, okay, the theory was you do 10 minutes of cardio, you just get through that sugar burning state, and then you stop. Oh, now we've lost it. They'll never go back. But they do. You do. When you go back to the next 10 minutes, you slide right into that aerobic state. We see it all the time.
You're talking about glycogen in the muscles and stuff, but you've never said anything about the liver. So, I mean, because that's where the glycogen is in it. So
right.
Your body is constantly replenishing, using your stores from your liver.
Yeah.
To go back into.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
So that's why that is. That's really what that happens. You could actually.
You can, but it doesn't. When the body's under duress, it doesn't happen at a rate fast enough to respond to the body's energy needs. So if you increase the body's energy needs, the liver on its own is not going to necessarily.
That's why you use it up in your muscles first, and then
right.
hopefully you can get your liver can catch up. That's why when you see marathon people are literally just hit the wall and then they. Because their liver can't keep up and their muscles are done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Were you going to say anything about the importance of stretching?
Yeah. I just got 5 minutes, so I'm going to hit on two things really quick. We'll talk about stretching, and then I'm going to talk about core strength too. So we'll talk about flexibility training. Flexibility training, quick tips. You do not warm up by stretching. Don't do that. If I go, I got to warm up before I fight, and you start doing this, if you stretch a cold muscle before a physical activity, you increase the injury rate by 30%. You are guaranteeing you're going to hurt something. it will eventually catch you. You've got to have the muscle warmed up. When we say you got to have a warm up, that means that you've had to have been at close to 50–55% of your maximum heart rate for a good 5 to 10 minutes. That's a warm up. That makes sure that there's blood flowing through the muscles are able to contract, increases that muscle flexibility before you stretch. Really, if you want to warm up for fighting, do slow work, fight a little bit. Take a jog around the park, aerobic, get your heart rate moving. Stretch after you're done. The muscles have plenty of blood, there's a lot of flexibility, the tissue's flexible. The soft connective tissue in the joint is flexible now because it's full of blood. That's the time to stretch. That's when you're going to get the most benefit out of flexibility.
I've been told that, okay, you go and you warm up 5–10 minutes, you're on a treadmill or something, got your heart rate up, and then stretch, and then go into the workout.
You can do that too.
And then stretch afterwards.
Sure, you can do that too.
That all increases flexibility, y'all?
It increases, what it does is, it does increase flexibility. Mostly what we're talking about though is we're lengthening tendons. We're lengthening the tendon in the muscle. So where the muscle inserts into the bone. Tendinitis develops when the tendon shortens. Okay? The tendon is kind of keratinized muscle tissue as it inserts into the bone. It's kind of stiff tissue. The softer tissue that actually does a lot of the contraction stays further away from the bone. When you develop tendinitis, it's because the tendon is shortened and it's pulled that nice soft vascular tissue really close to the bone. And you're irritating it when you flex. It's inflaming it. And certain types of activity, like weight training, will shorten tendons. So if you do weight training and you don't do flexibility, you're going to end up with tendinitis someplace. That's a lot of athletes, that's the #1 problem athletes have. They have tendinitis because they're constantly doing something, tennis, you get tennis elbow or you get golfer's elbow or whatever.
You get Viking elbow.
Yeah.
Both sides.
Yeah, both sides. So that's the deal. So flexibility helps prevent tendinitis. It helps increase the strength of the bone. It increases the strength of the attachment, helps prevent injury that way. And it does increase flexibility. You do get a little flexibility increase as well. Flexibility increase, don't make that your #1 goal of flexibility. You can go too far with that. There's a point of hyperflexibility. We see that a lot. Particularly women, if you're pregnant, don't do any stretching. I had a woman who was pregnant and took yoga the whole time. And when she was actually birth, she could take her toes and pull them to her calf. Pull them to her shin. Grab her toes and go, whoop! We had to fix that.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that had to be fixed. So make your goal behind flexibility.
Did you like fall down because her joints were so slow?
That's what we were waiting to happen. I have no idea how she was
She
pulling
walked
it
her
off.
foot was flat.
Yeah, it was crazy. Flexibility should be more about injury prevention. It should be more about increasing those tendons and helping get that strong attachment so that you're not tearing tendons, you're not tearing muscles and things like that. That should be your emphasis. Avoid stretching activities that say, okay, grab it and pull. No. Nuh-uh. Don't do that. This is the best stretching activity for your shoulders right here, and maybe make little sort of circles. Don't grab your elbow and yank. Why would you pull it? Don't pull a muscle beyond its natural range of motion. Don't do that. Because once you stretch these ligaments, like I said, they stay stretched. And then you've got a hyperflexible joint, and that's an injury waiting to happen. So don't do that. Keep your flexibility nice and reasonable. Don't do a hamstring flex by throwing your leg up in the air. And I see people do, I don't know, I see people doing that all the time after spin classes. They'll throw them up on the handlebars. You're like, whoa, 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 what are you trying to do?
Bring back.
Yeah, don't stretch a joint beyond its range of motion. Don't make that your objective. Make your objective to make sure that you're stretching to improve the health of the joint in general. That's what we're after. Okay? Real quick, core training. When you're doing core training is critical to all athletics, no more so in the SCA than any place else. It is critical to actually fighting better. And I'll talk a little more about this outside with everyone when we actually get out in arm and get outside. Core training is about controlling your center of gravity, okay, really, as far as it goes to athletics. Not only is it about keeping your spine from buckling, but it's also about being able to control your center of gravity. Literally, the human body center of gravity is right here. It's about 2 inches below the belly button. I want to control this. I want to direct my center of gravity. When we train soccer players, we train them to address the ball with the center of gravity. Not with their head, not with their foot, with this. This not only helps prevent injuries, It makes them move faster. When we train basketball players, we're trying to improve their vertical leap. We make them leap from here, from the center of their gravity. Once they can contract and can control this, they'll add at least an inch or two to their vertical leap if they've been doing their plyometrics training as well. So this is critical. Crunches, sit-ups, these are quickly becoming things of the past. These are not, and we've known it for a long time. It's just they're so popular out in the public and in the media that it's very hard to get people to stop doing them. Crunches, okay, specificity. You want to move the joint for a specific activity. I don't know what you do that makes you do this all day. And I don't know what you're doing for a living, but I don't want to know. But I don't do that all day. That does not, when you're doing crunches, that is what you're training your muscles to do. You're training the rectus abdominis to flex all day long. It has nothing to do with maintaining the back. The new core exercise that's coming out is that yoga plank. Is everybody familiar with that? You know the plank? The plank is this. Okay? This is not the plank. This is not the plank, you know. It's this. And being able to maintain this. What I'm doing here is actually preventing my spine from buckling. I'm actually performing the exercise to get the effect I want. So doing this plank. There's other kinds of planks. You can do T position. If I had better shoes, I might try X position. I'm not going to try that now. There's the T position. There's all different kinds of plank exercises you can do. You can destabilize that with different surfaces. There's Bosu balls out there that help do that. Balance planks. There's all different ways to do it.
So those are all isokinetic. Is there some sort of movement-related exercise you recommend they have to?
No, because the job it's trying to do here is isometric. It is an isometric. Yeah, we're trying to keep it from moving. Yeah. The other thing to think about too is, and I'll talk to you, if you've got a question on this, I'll talk to you about it individually because we're kind of running out of time. Get familiar with a muscle called the transverse abdominis. Transverse muscle, okay? It's a muscle that runs horizontally across the pelvic girdle. Its design is to pull, your pelvic girdle actually has a joint in it, so it's actually two bones. It's designed to pull the two bones together and stabilize the spine. It should activate anytime there's movement in the body, okay? It should stabilize the spine. That helps prevent lower back injuries. It also increases movement in the body. It also makes core activities, exercises, more efficient. Most people can't activate that muscle consciously. They don't even know it exists. But if I told you it's the muscle when you're on that going to crown tournament in Abacal, you had that one too many giant Mountain Dews. It's that muscle that keeps you from wetting your pants on the road. That's the transverse. That's the one. Women know it because it's the one that pushes out the babies. That's that muscle. So if you start working on, I've talked to you about doing different exercises on how to activate that. Some people can't even find it. Because we have a problem, we need biofeedback in our activities. We need to be able to, the reason we do the California workout, we do the chest and the biceps, because I can see those contract. And the brain can say, hey, they're contracting. Hey, contract them harder. Okay, hey, they're contracting harder. Contract them even harder. But when I say contract your transverse, the brain goes, I can't see that. What is that? Same with like muscles in the back and things like that. So, I'll talk to people, I can talk to people, I'll be around all day answering questions from people, so if you want to get some activities that help you with that. Particularly if you've got some lower back injuries, this is something you're going to want to look at doing. You're going to look at being able to get in touch with that muscle, because that's going to help prevent further lower back injuries. It may even help heal lower back injuries as well. So, any other questions right now?
How, like, doing plank, what's really good? I mean, is it repetition? Is it holding it for 30 seconds? Right, yep. Coming back, holding it for 30 seconds?
Yep. Yeah, you can hold it for 30 seconds. 30 to 90 seconds. Yeah, isometric without moving. Make sure that your back is, that you're flat on the back. That you're nice and flat. Even I have trouble doing it because my shoulder blades I'm so chest dominant, my chest wants to try to hold me up. So you'll see my shoulder blades start to wing, and that's me pushing into my chest too much. And I have to remind myself to let my shoulder blades come back. So I'm really pretty close to the floor when I'm doing them. That's how I know I'm doing them right. If I'm getting close to the floor, you can feel it. Also, make sure that you are, when you're doing it, you're in a neutral spine position. In other words, you're lined up, your neck is straight, your shoulders are back. Don't get down and scrunch up like this. If you train like this is the way you will live the rest of your life. If you train these muscles to do this, that's you, because again, they're circus bulls. They will do the tricks you teach them to do, and they'll keep doing them until you train them to do something else. So, anything else?
Well, we're gonna head out and get your armor on. I think the Queen's Guard is doing challenges. Rafe will be doing some more teaching outside. So there you go. Thanks, Rafe.
Yeah.